I commend it to the House.
Madam Speaker.
I call the Honourable Claire Curran.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's with huge relief and that I stand tonight to talk to this reform of the Privacy Act 1993 as recommended by the Law Commission's 2011 review of this Act. It's with huge relief that I stand and congratulate the current Minister of Justice, the Honourable Andrew Little, who has finally done what no Justice Minister under the previous National Government could do or would do, with introducing much-needed privacy reforms. 9 years they were in power. 9 years. This review of the Privacy Act was completed by the Law Commission in 2011. 3 Justice Ministers, no privacy reforms under the whole of their 9 years. This government, it is a hallmark of this government that it's introduced this legislation as a priority. As the Minister mentioned, it's not perfect. It still needs more work. Whether that work can be completely done in the Select Committee or whether it will need another iteration down the track, at least it's in the Parliament. It will go to Select Committee. It will get passed. It is a huge relief. It is much needed for our country. It is privacy reforms that are utterly fundamental to a healthy, functioning democracy. So, Madam Speaker, I actually want to put the record straight on the timeline around this piece of legislation. 25 years since its inception in 1993, 12 years actually in 2006 since the Law Commission was asked by the previous Labor government to undertake a review of the legislation, 7 years since that report was released by the Law Commission, 6 years since that report was tabled in Parliament by the then Minister of Justice, Simon Powell, 4 years since the then next Minister of Justice, Judith Collins, finally issued a press release saying that there would be some reform, a press release indeed, in 2014, just before the 2014 election, saying that there would be some reform of the Privacy Act, and then silence, a deadly silence. And what happened in the interim? Well, what happened in the interim was that there were privacy breaches. There was a raft of privacy breaches, whether it was the Ministry of Social Development, ACC, DHBs, numerous other government departments, including the Ministry of Justice, where there were privacy breaches, where public confidence in the government's ability to manage public data had sunk to an all-time low. No privacy reforms. What else happened during that time, Madam Speaker? There was reform to our security legislation, the Search and Surveillance Act, the GCSB Act, the TICSA Act, which is the Telecommunications Interception Capability and Security Act. All of those things had a place and there was a lot of public debate. But alongside that needed to go privacy law reform so that citizens would feel as if their rights were being protected, that their data and their ability to have their own personal information had a value put on it by that then government. But no, silence. That's what happened, Madam Speaker. That is the history of this piece of legislation. And it is a shameful history. Thankfully, this government is putting it right. We are putting into the Select Committee a piece of legislation that has a key purpose to promote and protect people's privacy and to give the Privacy Commissioner a stronger role. Obviously, it's going to do a lot of other things as well. But these things are critical and they're much overdue. And while this legislation may not go far enough, it will have the opportunity to be improved at Select Committee, and there can be more work done on the modernisation, taking things forward in 2018 and forward, which is work that this government is undertaking. Madam Speaker, technology has revolutionised the way that we disclose, share and store and release information. That revolution is only going to increase, and by their very nature, revolutions cause momentous disruption. And the digital revolution that has occurred, and if you look back over particularly those last 7 years, much has changed. But the protections of people's privacy has not been modernised, has not had a value put on it, and that is why this is so important. Having the individual and the importance of their personal data as the key purpose of this new Act is a very powerful statement for our citizens. It sends a clear message that this government sees people as central to the business of government, and keeping them safe is the point of the work that we're doing. The Privacy Act has historically sought to protect people's privacy while allowing information use by legitimate users such as government and businesses. But having people's trust is vital for a democracy, and a key part of that trust is people knowing that the information that they provide to government is being kept safe and being used for legitimate purposes, and that there is a framework around that to deal with breaches, for there to be mandatory disclosure of breaches, and for there to be enforcement by our Privacy Commissioner when those rules are not being upheld. And that finally is what this new piece of reform of this legislation is going to do. People also have rights over their data. They should be informed when, how and by whom their data is being collected and used. And that includes telling people when artificial intelligence or algorithms are making decisions on their data. This is a key piece of work that needs to be looked at closely in Select Committee. If there is a need for more reforms around this, this should occur as soon as possible. This government is looking into doing this work. Ensuring that we've got a robust digital rights framework is one of my priorities as the Minister for Digital Services and the Associate Minister for Open Government. And that is a piece of work that is being done in parallel to this legislation, along with 6 other countries, the Digital 7 countries, around looking at a digital rights framework, which will take, Madam Speaker, it will take this privacy reform even further. To modernise and to give the public of New Zealand comfort that we consider that their human rights should be considered in a digital context and should be valued. This is a world-leading piece of work that is being undertaken. It will further provide further reforms around our privacy regime, and it's something that we can be proud of. Madam Speaker, this is a much-needed, long overdue piece of legislation. It's something that I'm very proud to be talking to finally, after having stood on the other side for 9 years calling for it, along with many others in civil society, along with the privacy commissioners that have been active in the last 10 years. It goes back to a previous Labor government that instituted a review of the primary piece of legislation in 2006. It's taken 12 years to get to this point. 12 years. Why is it that that previous government was silent on privacy law reform? Why is it that they couldn't get it to the House? I thank them tonight for their support to Select Committee. I hope that the Justice Select Committee will treat this piece of legislation with the rigour that it deserves, and that it does receive full support across the House. I commend this to the House.
I call the Honourable Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise with pleasure to speak to this first reading of the Prime